The most engaged comment on the highest engagement Emperor video on YouTube is 443 likes long, and it's one sentence. The real question is, which version of the Emperor is the Alpha Legion serving? The person who typed that had found the right problem. 5 channels have made loyalist-confirmation videos about the Alpha Legion in the past 12 months. Inquisitor Romanov, Brushclub, others. Each presenting real textual evidence, each arriving at they were probably loyal. The evidence they use is genuine. Their conclusions are defensible. But every one of them asks the same question. Are they loyal? Nobody has asked the question underneath that one. Given the Cabal briefing on Nurth, given what Praetorian of Dorn reveals about pre-positioned sleeper cells, given the confirmed actions at Chondax and Isstvan V and during the siege, what was the operation's actual architecture? What did executing it require at each inflection point?
And what did carrying it for 10,000 years cost the legion that ran it? That is what this is about. The last Primarchs recovered during the Great Crusade were also the only Primarchs who were twins. Alpharius and Omegon, collectively referred to as Alpharius Omegon across imperial records, commanded the 20th Legion, designated the Alpha Legion, the final legion created during the first founding. Their physical description from the fandom wiki: copper-skinned, bald, heavy-browed, eyes that shifted between Arctic blue and shimmering green depending on the light. Taller than their legionaries as Primarchs always were, but not dramatically so. Their armor wasn't particularly different from an ordinary Alpha Legionaries. In a crowd of their own warriors, you couldn't reliably pick them out. That wasn't a limitation, it was infrastructure. The entire legion had undergone cosmetic modification to resemble their Primarchs. A standing order governed any interrogation of identity. The answer was always the same name. In the 41st millennium, this has become something close to a joke. In the 31st, it was a counterintelligence doctrine so thorough that Horus himself, after the heresy's opening moves, ordered First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon to sweep the sons of Horus for Alpha Legion infiltrators. He found nothing. Omegon's existence was unknown outside the Legion. To the rest of the Imperium, to Horus, to the Emperor, there was only Alpharius. The 20th's flagship, Alpha, had its corridor and level designation scrambled, its floor plans altered, its most secure chamber, documented in the Blood of the Emperor anthology, known as the Chamber of Truth, where legionnaires were expected to provide clarity only to Alpharius himself. Every layer of the Legion's organization existed to protect the one thing that gave the operation its power. 2 identical men running 2 separate command tracks, neither fully visible to the other's contacts. 1 soul in 2 bodies, steering a war neither of them had started. Nurth, approximate M30, a desert compliance world, a pre-industrial population resisting the 671st Expeditionary Fleet through tactics that Imperial commanders couldn't quite categorize. Strange, adaptive, almost foreknowing. The Alpha Legion was present as military support. John Grammaticus, a human perpetual, meaning a man who dies and reappears in a new body with his memory intact, who had served the Cabal for approximately 1,000 years, was present under the cover identity of an Imperial spy named Koenig Henniker. His actual mission? Arrange a conference between the Cabal and the Alpha Legion. He did. What follows is documented in Dan Abnett's Legion, the 7th novel in the Horus Heresy series.
The Cabal is a multi-species Xenos organization that claims to have been fighting the primordial annihilator, their designation for chaos, since before humanity built its first starship.
operatives drawn from more than 1,000 intelligent species. Thousands of years of institutional memory on the nature and behavior of the ruinous powers. Their contact on Nurth, Gahet, and a senior Eldar member named Slough Da. Their reason for approaching the Alpha Legion specifically. The 20th was the youngest legion, the most recently recruited, without the calcified institutional loyalties of legions that had been fighting for decades. In the Cabal's calculation, they were the one legion that might hear what the Xenos had to say without killing them first. They were right. The briefing used the acuity, the combined psychic faculty of the Cabal's seers, experienced not as verbal argument but as shared vision.
Alpharius Omegon, Paedo Sonika, a psyker named Sheer, all present at the Cabal briefing on Nurth, were subjected to the same visions simultaneously. What they were shown was a branching futures map built from thousands of years of accumulated intelligence on chaos, the Imperium, and the nature of warp-fed gods. In the first future, the Emperor wins the Horus heresy. The Imperium survives intact. It endures for 10 to 20,000 years, per the secondary sources paraphrasing Abnett's text, before chaos absorbs the galaxy. The long, slow entropy. Centuries of war, institutional stagnation, gradual loss. The 41st millennium that 40,000 players know, a dying institution sustained by the barely living body of a god emperor on a mechanical throne. That is what the loyalist victory looks like from a timescale longer than human civilization. In the second future, Horus wins. Horus, in victory, eventually confronts what the chaos gods have made of him. His recognition of his own corruption, the shame-fueled self-examination the Cabal's seers had observed across multiple probability branches, destroys him. The conflagration that follows kills humanity. But in killing humanity, it starves the chaos gods of the emotional sustenance that powers them. The ruinous powers diminish without their primary food source. The galaxy's other species survive. The Cabal wanted Horus to win and humanity to die, because in their calculation, it was the only path to eliminating chaos permanently. Alpharius heard all of this. Then he reframed it entirely. The Cabal's plan as subordinate to imperial purpose, the managed loss as an instrument of the Emperor's own strategic goal. He declared that everything he would do from that moment forward, he would do for the Emperor. That isn't an acceptance of the Cabal's plan as stated. It's a reframing. Alpharius didn't sign on because he wanted Horus to win.
He signed on because the Cabal's probabilistic analysis that the heresy had to be lost in a specific, contained way was the only available strategy for achieving what the Emperor himself had always wanted. And the Emperor's physical survival required that the heresy be survivable, not won cleanly by the traitors, contained, ended at Terra. Horus dead, the throne occupied. The fandom wiki is direct about the uncertainty. It's unclear whether the Cabal misunderstood their psychic visions, thus acting in such a way that they created a self-fulfilling prophecy, or whether they were actually agents of chaos or some other faction. The visions could have been wrong. The Cabal could have been manipulated by something operating above their own visibility. Alpharius accepted a mission built on intelligence that was probabilistic at best. He accepted it anyway, because the alternative, doing nothing while the heresy happened to the Imperium, was worse. Grammaticus left the meeting knowing he had, in his own estimation, doomed his species. He killed himself at the epilogue of Legion with that knowledge sitting on him. Alpharius left the meeting with a war to run. 2 years later, the heresy started on a world called Davin. The sequence matters for the timeline. Horus detoured to Davin while en route to Draconis 311 for a campaign in the Cades cluster. He had no strategic reason to be there. The Sons of Horus Lexicanum entry, sourcing to McNeil's False Gods, describes what waited for him. The Temple of the Serpent Lodge, a chaos mystery cult operating under a warrior healing lodge cover, already corrupted before Horus arrived. Word-bearer First Chaplain Erebus had maneuvered the entire sequence. The placement of a corrupted athame, the wound, the healing that was actually a ritual induction to reach this moment.
The fandom wiki preserves the assessment directly. It was on Davin, within the blasphemous fane known as the Temple of the Serpent Lodge, that things began to turn, where the momentum that would lead to the Horus heresy first began to gather. Horus went into the lodge wounded. He came out changed. The Alpha Legion hadn't orchestrated Davin. Erebus and the Word-bearers did that. What the Alpha Legion had, and what made their position at Davin significant, was foreknowledge. The Cabal's briefing told them the heresy was coming approximately 2 years before it started. The wound on Davin was the starter's gun. From that moment, the clock the Cabal had described was running, and the Alpha Legion was already positioned to manage it. There is also an echo built into the lore that Abnett clearly intended. The weapon that initiated Horus's corruption at Davin was an athame, a chaos-tainted ritual blade. The weapon the Emperor uses to kill Horus in The End and The Death Volume 3 is also an athame. The instrument that opened the wound and the instrument that closed the war share a classification. The heresy's arc runs from one blade to another, through 4 decades and trillions of dead. The Alpha Legion's operations span that entire arc. Davin started it. The vengeful spirit ended it. What happened in between was the managed loss. Praetorian of Dorn. John French's 2016 novel, Book 39 in the Horus Heresy series, reveals something that retroactively reframes the entire timeline. By the time the Solar War began, the Alpha Legion had sleeper cells embedded in Terra's civilian and military population that predated the heresy itself. Hypno-indoctrinated, lying dormant for years inside the most heavily defended population center in the galaxy. The Warhammer community's Secrets of the Solar War feature, published alongside the novel, describes the activation doctrine in French's own terms. Alpha Legion units placed into enemy territory are trained and conditioned to pursue broad mission objectives in whatever way they think best. An Alpha Legion force or warrior might have been given a series of potential mission parameters before its infiltration. A word spoken down a vox, or scrawled on a slip of parchment, is enough to change the direction of their action from one parameter to another. And it isn't uncommon for members of the same force to be following different mission parameters. Different members of the same team, running entirely different objectives simultaneously, without knowing the other's orders. One protecting an individual, while another prepares to kill the same person, awaiting whichever activation word arrives first. These cells weren't improvised responses to the heresy's opening moves. They were seeded before the heresy began. The network that would activate during the siege of Terra was already buried under the imperial palace while Horus was still war master, still loyal, still fighting the Great Crusade alongside his brothers. Deliverance Lost. Gav Thorpe's 2011 novel, Book 18, shows what infiltration looks like executed with surgical precision. After the drop site massacre, Alpha Legion apothecaries recovered bodies of fallen Raven Guard and performed face transplants. Their own legionnaires received the faces of the dead.
Combined with digested neural knowledge extracted from Raven Guard brains, 3 Alpha Legion operatives embedded successfully within Corvus Corax's surviving legion reached deliverance and eventually sabotaged the Primarch Project's gene code with demon blood. Omegon recovered the stolen genetic material by disguising himself as a Mechanicum-enhanced soldier. He escaped the planet undetected.
Every Raven Guard who tested the 3 operatives' identity looked at Raven Guard faces and walked away satisfied. Rob Sanders' novella, The Serpent Beneath, establishes how Omegon's command track ran independently of Alpharius's public one. In one key scene, Omegon reveals to his inner circle that the operative they believed to be Omegon was a stand-in the entire time. The real Omegon had been running a parallel operation. The identity doctrine wasn't ceremony. It was functional infrastructure for running 2 missions simultaneously without either mission exposing the other. Chandax provides the clearest confirmed example of the Legion actively steering the heresy toward the loyalist outcome from inside the traitor host. The Alpha Legion fleet was operating under Horus's orders to recruit Jagatai Khan and the White Scars.
The Lexicanum's Alpha Legion article, sourcing to the Chandax campaign novels, records what actually happened. Alpha Legion elements destroyed a comms relay that had been blocking the White Scars from receiving Rogel Dorn's message about the heresy. The Lexicanum states it directly. The Alpha Legion made sure that Jagatai Khan would join the Emperor, executing Horus's orders publicly, producing the opposite outcome privately. That is what dual tracking looks like from inside a traitor host. The Alpha Legion's official battle cry, as documented in the fandom wiki, Hydra Dominatus, or for the Emperor. The second option is noted as believed to be used as a mockery, but may actually indicate the Legion's true loyalty. Even the battle cry was structurally ambiguous. Even that had 2 readings. The drop site massacre is where this argument faces its hardest test, and it should be faced directly. Isstvan V, 006.M31.
3 first-wave legions, Iron Hands, Salamanders, Raven Guard, deployed on the presumption that the second wave was loyal reinforcement. The Alpha Legion was in that second wave alongside the Word-Bearers, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, and Emperor's Children. When the signal came, the second wave revealed itself. The 3 first-wave legions were caught between traitor forces on an open killing ground with nowhere to retreat. Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, died on the surface that day. Corvus Corax escaped by the thinnest margin. 3 legions were broken in an afternoon, roughly 20% of the remaining Loyalist Space Marine strength, destroyed or crippled in a single engagement. The Alpha Legion was part of the force that did that. The Lexicanum, the fandom wiki, and the Forge World Betrayal sourcebook all confirm it. This isn't disputed.
Inquisitor Romanov's Alpha Legion confirmed loyal, Dropsite Massacre new lore is mind-blowing. Currently, the dominant treatment of this argument in the niche takes the new evidence from John French's Dropsite Massacre novel as a loyalist confirmation event. The new evidence is real. Multiple readers who completed that novel reported the same content. Ingo Petch, listed in the Dramatis Personae of Abnet's original Legion as a first captain of the Alpha Legion, is shown at Isstvan V operating under Omegon's direct orders, terminating a traitor officer and ensuring loyalist survivors are recovered rather than killed. This is dual tracking at the massacre itself, in textual form, corroborated across independent accounts of the novel. The hardest counter-argument to that reading, and the one the argument has to reckon with. The margin was small, and the main body's contribution to loyalist casualties was enormous. The critique that appears in community analysis is blunt.
The fake betrayal thesis doesn't account for the scale of what Alpha Legion participation in the massacre actually produced. You can't absorb a 20% reduction in Loyalist Space Marine strength by pointing to one captain running a protection mission on the margins. The math is brutal. The body count is real. The structural argument for why the Legion stayed embedded runs like this. An operation managing the heresy toward a specific terminus can't be executed by an agent who breaks cover before that terminus arrives. If the Alpha Legion reveals itself at Isstvan V, if it turns on the other second-wave traitor legions and fights for the first wave, the operation ends there. Horus doesn't reach Terra. The final confrontation doesn't happen. The Cabal's probability tree collapses.
And an early heresy termination that leaves the traitors scattered and the loyalists depleted, with no definitive resolution on the Emperor's survival, achieves none of what the Cabal's analysis required. Omegon articulated the cost at the operation's outset. The fandom wiki preserves the quote from the Alpharius Omegon entry. "I understand the conflict in your hearts, how one may beat for duty while the other bleeds for your Legion brothers who will be sacrificed. We are Alpha Legion, and we take the long view." Isstvan V was the long view paying its price in Iron Hand's blood. Alpharius was dead before the siege began. Rogel Dorn killed him at the Battle of Pluto, 010.M31, during the Solar War's opening phase. The engagement is fully documented in Praetorian of Dorn and confirmed by author John French. The Alpha Legion fleet, over 200 vessels led by the flagship Alpha, had spent an entire year drifting into the Sol system in stasis. The crew powered down below thermal detection threshold, creeping at minimum speed to reduce heat signature while warp travel remained interdicted by Dorn's outer defenses. An entire year of moving silently through space, dead to all Imperial sensors, before the operation could begin. When they arrived, they hit every defensive layer simultaneously. Sleeper cells activated across Terra. A freighter detonated over the planet, killing millions. The Damocles starport overwhelmed. Riots in the hives. On Pluto's moon Hydra, home to the astropathic monitoring station at the heart of the Sol system's surveillance network, Alpharius led his personal strike team. He personally killed the station commander, Captain Coro, when Centurion Gregorius Skekir and the last 12 Imperial Fists reached the plasma reactor to hold it. Alpharius himself arrived and killed them. He moved through the astropathic chamber like something that couldn't be stopped. Then the Phalanx arrived. Rogel Dorn had slingshot his mobile star fortress around the solar system's competing gravity wells and appeared over Pluto with an entire fleet in tow. He teleported directly into the chamber. The Lexicanum's Battle of Pluto entry preserves what Alpharius said before the fight started. He maintained that he wasn't doing this for Horus, but instead for the future, and urged Dorn to help him in achieving true victory. Dorn ignored him. He stepped into Alpharius's strike, pinned the spear in his own shoulder to control it, grabbed the shaft with one hand and used his chain sword, Storm's Teeth, to sever Alpharius's hands at the wrists. Then he slashed across his chest, stabbed him through with his own spear, and finished with Storm's Teeth through the top of his brother's skull. Distantly, across whatever link connected the two Primarchs, Omegon felt it happen. He went quiet. The Lexicanum records that he became distant, then was immediately asked to call Horus and report on the Sol system operation status. He answered the call using Alpharius's name. Like he had done hundreds of times before, Omegon permanently assumed the identity of Alpharius from that moment forward. The heresy's final years were run by one man
where there had been 2. The architect of the operation died 3 to 4 years before the siege ended, killed in a battle the Imperial record shows as a traitor operation to destabilize the Sol system. What he said to Dorn before the fight, "This isn't for Horus, it's for the future," was spoken once, in a locked chamber on Pluto's moon, and entered no surviving record.
The end came in the end and the death. Dan Abnett's 3-volume closing of the 60-volume Horus Heresy series confirms Alpha Legion activity during the siege's final phase through 2 specific textual anchors, both of which have been corroborated across multiple community accounts of the novels. The first, an Alpha Legionnaire identifying himself as Alpharius, appeared alongside the prophetess Actea during the siege, aiding Ol Person and John Grammaticus in their efforts to reach the Emperor. The Lexicanum's Alpha Legion article, sourcing to the end and the death, records that this Alpha Legionnaire told the group that his other brothers on the planet who were now activated would aid them in fulfilling their objective. John Grammaticus, the same human perpetual who arranged the original Cabal briefing on Nurth approximately 30 years earlier, who has the longest continuous relationship with the Alpha Legion of any non-Legion figure in the primary texts, is here, during the heresy's last hours, being actively guided by an Alpha Legionnaire. The pre-position network, seeded years before the heresy began, is running. The second, Ingo Peck activates the Emperor Alignment code word. Reader accounts of the scene from Volume 1 describe Peck revealing to Grammaticus that he was specifically sent to enact this code word, the activation phrase that switches every pre-positioned Alpha Legion asset to the Emperor supporting parameter. The mission parameter system documented in Praetorian of Dorn's Secrets of the Solar War feature is now executing its terminal instruction. Every embedded agent who received the Emperor alignment parameter is now oriented toward the same objective. Horus lowered the shields on the vengeful spirit himself. The Sons of Horus Lexicanum entry makes it plain. Horus, in a bid to end the campaign quickly, lowered the shields around his flagship, daring the Emperor to board it. The decision came from inside Horus, his psychology, his pride, his need to face the Emperor directly. Multiple boarding parties teleported in. The Dan Abnett interview with Warhammer Community in January 2024 confirms who was aboard. Rogel Dorn, Garviel Loken, Ezekiel Abaddon, Malkador the Sigillite. Sanguinius, the Blood Angels Primarch, had already boarded in Volume 2, attempting to kill Horus and failing. Ol Person and John Grammaticus reach the vessel through the chaos of the final boarding. They are confirmed present in the Volume 3 sequence. No Games Workshop source confirms that Alpha Legion operatives were physically present in the Emperor's duel with Horus, or guided the Emperor's hand in the killing blow.
The case for Alpha Legion navigation of the final act rests on what is textually supported. Their code word activated the Emperor alignment parameter during the siege. An Alpha Legionnaire aided the Perpetuals who eventually boarded the Vengeful Spirit. The network placed before the heresy began was running its final instruction. Whether those threads connected directly to the moment of Horus's death isn't stated by any novel. The chain is structural. It isn't explicit. What is explicit? The Emperor killed Horus with an athame, the same weapon classification as the blade that wounded Horus on Davin. The weapon that started the heresy's clock and the weapon that stopped it share a name. In every Games Workshop codex published since the Horus heresy ended, the Alpha Legion is classified as Chaos Space Marines. No loyalist qualifier, no asterisk. Alpharius died on Pluto, before the outcome was confirmed.
He didn't see whether Horus reached Terra under the right conditions, whether the Emperor survived the duel, whether the Imperium held. He was killed in a battle the Imperial record frames as a traitor operation. The conversation at the end, not for Horus but for the future, was heard by Dorn, spoken once, and vanished into the sealed records of a battle that official history doesn't publicly acknowledge in detail. Omegon survived, assumed his brother's name permanently, and led the Legion east after the siege, rather than retreating into the Eye of Terror like the other traitor legions. His eventual fate is officially unresolved in GW's current canon. The battle at Escrador reportedly ended with Guilliman killing him. Guilliman ordered the body burned. The Legion didn't break. The counterstrikes continued. The operational logic for maintaining the traitor classification follows directly from Alpha Legion doctrine, even if no canonical text states it.
The Legion's value to any ongoing operation against chaos rests entirely on their credibility as hostile actors. An announcement of secret loyalty would destroy the network, and would achieve nothing because there is no institutional framework in the post-heresy Imperium for a Chaos Space Marine Legion to present evidence of long-game fidelity and receive anything except investigation and destruction. The Inquisition doesn't do nuance at Legion scale. The cover had to hold. The High Lords of Terra declared the Alpha Legion wiped out 3 times, M31, M32, and M39. The Lexicanum confirms all 3 declarations were wrong. By M41, the Legion has splintered into warbands across the galaxy. Some drifted into genuine chaos alignment after 10,000 years without central direction, others still reading as covertly loyal. The Lexicanum notes that some Alpha Legionaries in M41 still view themselves as loyal sons of the Emperor, seeing themselves as the Emperor's test, challenging his servants to see if they are worthy. No acknowledgement, no monument, no correction. The men who paid the cost in blood at Isstvan V, the Iron Hands, the Salamanders, the Raven Guard survivors whose story David Annandale tracks in The Damnation of Pythos, never received an explanation. The Alpha Legion wasn't there to provide one. The community content wave is real, and it's driven by specific publication events. John French's Drop Site Massacre novel, released in the 2024 to 2025 publication window, contains the Ingo Peck evidence at Isstvan V, confirmed dual tracking at the massacre itself, under Omegon's direct orders, protecting loyalist survivors. Dan Abnett's End and the Death trilogy, completed with Volume 3 in February 2024, contains the Ingo Peck codeword activation and the Alpha Legionnaire guiding Ol Person and Grammaticus during the siege. These are new textual anchors, not fan inference. Mike Brooks has a Ghost Legion novel announced, promising additional Alpha Legion material. The community identified the pattern in these publications and responded. Inquisitor Romanov's Alpha Legion confirmed loyal, Dropsite Massacre new lore is mind-blowing, set the template. Brushclub extended it with 2 separate videos. 5 channels, multiple confirmation events, a cluster of content all asking the same question. Are they loyal? The operational spine is the part that hasn't been assembled. Not are they loyal, but given the briefing on Nurth, given what Praetorian of Dorn establishes about the pre-position network, given the confirmed dual tracking from Chandax to Isstvan V to the siege, what was the plan's architecture? What did each inflection point require from the Legion executing it? And what did sustaining the cover cost, measured in dead Primarchs, absent reputation, and 10,000 years of imperial anathema? That's the question the 4-4-3-like comment was gesturing toward without being able to name it. Back to the comment. The question it poses, which version of the Emperor is the Alpha Legion serving, is the right question because the Cabal's plan
whatever its probabilistic uncertainties, required two things to happen simultaneously. The emperor had to physically survive the heresy, and the weight of the heresy's sacrifices had to accumulate. The emperor on the golden throne is the physical constant, a psychic beacon keeping the Astronomicon lit, the navigational anchor for a million-world imperium. Without him, the imperium collapses.
The heresy had to be contained, meaning Horus had to reach Terra.
The final confrontation had to occur under conditions that allowed the emperor to kill Horus himself, and the imperium had to survive that killing intact enough to continue. An earlier end at Isstvan, a traitor victory before Terra, or a loyalist collapse that left the throne empty, any of those outcomes produces a different result. The throne emperor needed a managed loss, a catastrophe with a specific end date, in a specific location, with a specific weapon. The emperor taking shape in the warp is something else. Current GW lore describes what's been called the Star Child, the emperor's psychic essence coalescing in the warp, fed by the accumulated faith and suffering of billions across 10,000 years of war. The heresy didn't just create the dying emperor on the golden throne. It created the conditions for what the emperor might eventually become beyond it.
That required the heresy to happen, to cost what it cost, to produce casualties at the scale it did across 10,000 subsequent years. The Cabal's second future, where humanity dies and starves the Chaos Gods, maps onto this in a specific way. What dies is a version of humanity. What potentially survives, in the warp, is the Emperor's accumulated weight. The Alpha Legion's operations served both simultaneously. They ensured the heresy stayed contained, catastrophic but survivable, ending at Terra with Horus dead, while remaining embedded long enough to run the Emperor alignment code word during the siege's critical hours, and to aid the Perpetuals who eventually reached the Vengeful Spirit. Whether the Cabal's probabilistic visions were accurate, self-fulfilling, or manipulated by something operating above even the Cabal's line of sight, the Alpha Legion couldn't know that on Nurth in approximate M30. They made the calculation available to them, and they executed it at total cost.
The Alpha Legion has been called the most treacherous legion in Imperial history. They are also the only legion that lost their Primarchs, their reputation, and their allies, and won. Horus is dead. The heresy was contained. The Imperium survived. The Alpha Legion did the math and paid the price. The audience asked which emperor they were serving. The answer is both. That is the operation's entire architecture. Subscribe for more stories like this.